the neat thing about this being in that business is that we can do really well financially, but also do good socially. We can make a social impact and truly help families that are looking for a clean, safe, and quiet place to live and raise their family, have their kids go to the best public schools and do it in an affordable manner.
You're listening to the Real Returns podcast, where we learn how real investments can make a real impact. Join your hosts, Andrew and Dan, as they share stories and interview business leaders on how real estate and other forms of investment can create meaningful change for individuals and communities around the world.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Real Returns podcast. I am your host, Andrew Reichert. I'm joined with my co-host, Dan the Man Crouchy. What's happening?
Hey, Andrew. I'm excited today to be talking to Kevin Bupp. Really enjoy our guests and learning from them. But hey, today is a special day in the United States. It is actually National Compliment Day. And, Andrew, you and I work closely together all the time. And I thought I've been starting a lot of my conversations there with a compliment because it's National Compliment Day. So I want to start by paying you a compliment as we kick off this podcast episode today. So I just wanted to commend you for your selection of business partner and podcast co-host.
I was going to say, there's no way this is going to be a real compliment.
I just noticed, you've done an amazing job at who I think he's handsome. He's kind. He's sucks at real estate investing, but he's hilarious. I'll give him that. So just kudos to you, Andrew, for that. Now your turn. You can compliment me.
Well, I was going to wait for National Gratitude Day to just say how thankful I am to myself for selecting you as my co-host. So very, very funny, Dan. Thank you. Appreciate the compliment. Yeah, we do have Kevin Bupp, as you mentioned, founder and CEO of Sunrise Capital Investors. So excited to chat with him. He's got over 16 years experience investing. And one of the things I like is he's picked these often overlooked niches, just like we tend to do, Dan. He's investing in mobile home parks, which are often overlooked. We love investing in things that are often overlooked as well. And he cares about community impact, which is cool, something we talk about a lot. But he's also an author, an educator, and a podcast host. So I'm super excited to have Kevin Bupp on the show. Kevin, would you mind telling folks a little bit about yourself? How did you get into this business and what are you doing currently?
Yeah. First and foremost, Andrew, Dan, appreciate you guys having me on. Excited to be here. As far as my background, I always joke and say that real estate found me. I didn't find it, so incredibly grateful for that. And it found me early on when I didn't really, I went to high school, wasn't really academically driven, didn't really understand. No one ever told me why I was learning what I was learning. And so I just really didn't apply myself all that much. And, but at an early age, I was always entrepreneurial, had a paper out at 12, mowed grasses, shoveled snow, did all those things just to try to make an extra buck and buy the things that I wanted. And so, fast forward, I knew there was, I didn't know what to wrap my arms around. I had energy. I had, excitement about, what the future held. I just didn't know where that was going, where that energy was going to be applied. But ultimately, at the age of 19, I met a guy who became my mentor, and he introduced me to the world of real estate. So literally worked for him for a year and a half for free while I was going to community college and tending bar in the evening, and learned enough in that year and a half, saved up enough money bartending to buy my first property at the age of 20. And that's what really kicked it off. I mean, I don't like, even to this day, I don't like reinventing wheels. I like being an innovator to a certain degree, but when a system is tried and true and it works, try not to, mess up the process that's been in place for many, many years. So I kind of followed his footsteps and just built a small multi-family portfolio in my, early to mid 20s and got quite a bit of traction and scale doing so. By my mid 20s, I'd acquired a portfolio of about 120 single family homes and a few hundred multi-family doors. And then, 08 happened. 08, when I was down here in Florida at that time, 08 was a massive chaotic crisis that ultimately essentially bankrupted me to a certain degree. I never filed bankruptcy, but basically lost the majority of what I had over a 3-year span and had to start over. And that's kind of when mobile home parks came into the fray. And I'm trying to condense this in a really short period of time because it's been over 20 years. But ultimately, in 2011, I accidentally stumbled across mobile home parks, asset class I'd never considered. It's not one of the major food groups in commercial real estate. It was intrigued enough by a gentleman I met, and he had spoken so highly of the asset class. I went out and I bought one, and bought that first one in Atlanta, Georgia in 2012, and bought the second, third, fourth, fifth. Fast forward, now we've acquired, I don't know, probably over 50 or 60 communities. We currently own communities in 18 states today, and it's been a fun ride. So again, that's You had mentioned 16 years in being. I think I need to update whatever information sheet I gave you. So I'm 45 now. I bought my first property when I was 20. So 25 years, that is pretty outdated. But in any event, I've been doing it quite some time, and I've seen a lot along the way and had a lot of fun as well.
Amazing. So good for you, Kevin. Sounds like you've kind of seen the highs and lows and have been around the block. Tell us a little bit, how did you go from being just an individual investor to starting Sunrise Capital Group?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, I kind of my first foray when I was, buying single family homes, I initially, just like a lot of us do, we try to do as much as we can by ourselves. We wear all the hats of the business, realize that we probably suck at most of them and that literally we need to hire people. But ultimately, there's that weird pivotal moment when you're growing your business where you don't have enough revenue to hire all the people you need. And so you got to make tough decisions of like literally hiring before you can afford to do so. And you always wait too long to do that. And then you're reactive and you basically are trying to bring people in when you're literally, there's no hours left in the day. Your bandwidth's stretched as far as it can go. So in any event, I learned earlier on about building a team, hiring the right talent, putting the right people in the right seats. And so the second time around, I had the opportunity to kind of come in and rebuild this thing and do it better the second time around. I really went in with a lot more intention of building out kind of what does the future look like? Where can I bought the first park and I just wanted to understand the business model, right? I wanted to understand like the nuances with that asset class. So I literally did the first one myself with one other partner. It was us doing everything again, but that wasn't the intent. The intent was like, if we can make this work and we can scale and we see opportunity to scale here, well, let's build out the framework of what it needs to look like 10 years down the road. And that's ultimately what we did. And we just basically been backfilling those roles on the org chart. I mean, there's been shifts along the way, but really it took me about 3 years, 2.5 years of buying with my own money, friends and family, like risking my own capital before I was ready to actually formulate and put together what I call Sunrise now, right? Like the actual brand, bring the people in, bring capital in from outside sources. That's what it happened in 2014. So I kind of went at it again the second time around on my own until I could prove the concept. But ultimately, that's what really led to forming Sunrise. I wanted to really build a brand around it. And again, kind of looking out 10 years of like, okay, here we go. Get an opportunity to start over again, clean slate. Let's do this better the second time around. And again, the name came, the name Sunrise. I mean, I live in Florida, so it just seemed like the right fitting name and the right logo. And ultimately that was it, man. It was birthed in 2014. And again, it's been a little over a decade and it's been a great ride. So
yeah. Really cool. I respect that. I respect the desire to, spend some time figuring out and make sure you get it right especially before you're talking about, stewarding other people's hard-earned resources. So I respect that a lot.
I think it's important. I think that's critically important. I know not everyone has that opportunity or luxury to do so, but I mean, I do think that it's a major burden to be a steward of capital, taking capital from outside sources, right? And I think we've all probably seen over the past 10 years, I think a lot of folks get into it, not necessarily fully comprehending or understanding the burden associated with it. There was a lot of capital flowing a couple of years ago. I mean, you could post a Facebook ad and someone will probably give you $1 million to go invest in something, right? And I think too many folks take that very lightly. And it's not, these folks that we're raising capital from, they've worked incredibly hard their entire lives to build a nest egg, and they're looking for someone to be responsible and help them continue growing that nest egg and create wealth preservation for them and their families and their heirs and everyone else, right? Like we're part of their estate planning. So I don't take that lightly.
Yeah. Love that. Totally. Couldn't agree more. So, hey, would love to talk shop, and hopefully we'll have a chance to get into some of the details of, how you guys view mobile home park investing and the work that you do specifically. But the theme of our podcast is focus on impact investing and the way that our work helps to create more flourishing and just betterment in the world around us. So some of the things that I think I've learned about you are that you've started a handful of charitable organizations. I also hear and understand that, through your podcast work, you seem to be passionate about education and maybe even mentorship, since you had a mentor once upon a time. But tell us about, you touch a lot of different things, but how do you think about the work that you do and the impact that it has on the world around you?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. There's a lot of different directions we could go with it. I mean, from like a perspective of the company, I think one of the cool things about the mobile home park space, I mean, obviously we're all well aware of the affordable housing crisis that exists in the country. It's only getting worse. Being in the mobile home park space, it's an interesting asset class because it truly is. You can go to any market in the country and it by far is the best, or it is the most affordable non-subsidized housing that exists. And it doesn't mean it's the lowest of quality. I mean, many of our communities, I mean, I will put them up against any B class or A- class, apartment community. We've got brand new nice homes in our communities that are built to similar stick-built standards. I mean, they've got the same kitchen cabinets, the same floor. I mean, like they're incredibly nice, but they're incredibly affordable. And so, the neat thing about this being in that business is that we can do really well financially, but also do good socially. We can make a social impact and truly help families that are looking for a clean, safe, and quiet place to live and raise their family, have their kids go to the best public schools and do it in an affordable manner. We can allow them and help them do that. So it's pretty neat that we get to kind of, at least, we're not going to solve the affordable housing crisis us alone, but we can at least make a dent in it. So it's neat to be able to be just a part of that solution. As far as like the other charitable endeavors I'm involved in, I've always tried to marry hobbies that I enjoy with helping out socially. And so one of the organizations that I'm a part of, it's a bike ride I started now almost 15 years ago. It's called Tiny Hands Foundation. Basically, I'm a big cyclist. I've been a road cyclist for many, many years. And ultimately, I started that as a way to help raise funds for a couple of charities that are near and dear to my heart here in the West Coast of Florida area, basically helping less fortunate families, single mothers that have kids that ultimately are just found themselves in hard financial times and not able to fully provide everything that they need for their family and their children. So that ride's called 72 Hours to Key West. Basically, I pair my love of cycling, encourage others that have a shared love of cycling, but also love doing good socially and bring them in. And once a year, we raise quite a bit of money for two different organizations. And again, been doing that now for 15 years. And outside of that, I mean, I'm involved in Big Brothers Big Sisters. I've been a mentor to a few different kids in that program over the last 10 or 12 years. And outside of that, man, as far as real estate, just like you guys, I love doing the podcast. I kind of started the podcast for a couple of reasons. Number one, back then the information wasn't really there. It was about 10 or 11 years ago when I started it. But also I felt as though there was plenty of other people out there that had the same questions I had. I was interviewing folks, asking questions, getting answers and help giving advice and guidance. And I figured I had those same interests, and there's plenty of others that were maybe in that same spot that we're trying to learn. We're trying to figure out a better way, a better mousetrap, right? And be a more successful real estate investor. So I guess my social giving, social impact comes in many forms, but I'll leave it at that.
So cool. So I don't know a whole lot about mobile home park investing. It's as an asset class, I think it's picked up steam a little bit here in the last decade or so.
Yeah.
And we've seen a number of deals. I have actually looked at some deals, but at Burgo, we've decided it's just not our bread and butter. So we're going to stay in our lane. But can you just tell us a little bit about that investment model? Why are you in 18 states?
I'll nail it. The one question about why we're in 18 states, it's a little different than, multifamily. In a perfect world, we would own all of our assets in 3 or 4 markets. Multifamily, when you look at the sheer number of multifamily properties across the country, it probably trumps mobile home parks by like 50x as far as like the sheer number of actual assets. And another unique thing about mobile home parks is compared to apartments is they're not building any more mobile home parks. In fact, it's an asset class that has a diminishing supply. So there's more that get shut down and redeveloped on an annual basis than new supply that come in the marketplace, whereas multifamily quite different, right? Like there's new product that's continually coming online. And so for that reason, we're kind of forced to go, basically, to go where the opportunities lie. And that has basically spread us out now amongst 18 different states. So that's the reason for that. And as far as, just the asset class as a whole, I mean, really, if we want to break it down to its most basic level, it's multifamily. It's just the horizontal form of multifamily, right? With a few nuances. Number one being that the majority of our residents own their own home. So that's where the big differences start coming out. Is that basically we own all the land, the community, we own the infrastructure, we own all the common area, and the residents own their own home. And so for that reason, what makes that unique is that they own their own home. And so if the roof leaks, plumbing breaks, HVAC goes out, anything like that, they treat it, just like they would be if they were a normal homeowner, where they're going to call the vendor directly. They're going to call the HVAC company to fix their AC. They're going to call the roof company. So we're not involved in those maintenance or repair aspects that you would be if you had a normal rental house or an apartment unit. So that's one of the big differences, and one of the benefits I see in that is that just the repairs and maintenance, setting aside necessary reserves, it's much lower than that of traditional rental housing. And then what kind of also ties into that is being that they own their own home, our resident base is a lot stickier. It's just it's very akin to that of, someone that lives in a subdivision that owns their home in a subdivision, right? They basically sometimes they might own their year, but more commonly probably 5-7 years, sometimes multiple decades. And so that's very common as well. We've got some residents that have lived in our communities over 40 years. We also have many residents that have extensions of their family that live in other homes inside the community, just like you would in the neighborhood, right? You got grandparents or aunts, uncles, things like that live in there. And so it just creates a very different type of resident base, one that's a lot stickier and that typically stays a lot longer. And then when they do turn over, what occurs is they put the unit up for sale. They continue paying the lot rent responsibility. Someone else comes in, a prospective buyer, we approve them, whatever. They come and they buy the unit. They take over the lot rent responsibility, but there's never like a downtime. We have a down unit, 2 months, make ready costs, things like that. Basically, it's a lot more consistent from an income perspective because that lot rent continually comes in. That's a perfect world. So don't get me wrong. There's situations where there might be an abandoned unit or that just might not play out in that manner. But generally speaking, those are some of the big differences of traditional rental housing versus that of mobile home parks.
Yeah, makes sense. It sounds kind of attractive. I'm guessing there's a lot less CapEx, issues to manage. And I don't know, what does CapEx look like for you? You have big.
If we don't own any of the homes, I mean, really, it comes down to like roads and utility lines, water lines, sewer lines, electrical infrastructure. So a lot of these parks were built. It depends what part of the country, but I mean, there's parks that were built, 70, 80 years ago. A lot of what we own was probably built somewhere between the 60s and the 80s. And we have some parks that were built in the 90s. When you start looking at the stuff built in the 60s and 70s, I mean, that's old infrastructure, right? 40, 50-year-old infrastructure. And so when we go into a community, that's one of the big things that you can't see what's underground, but know that that's the thing that's going to eat your lunch a lot. Like it's going to eat your lunch if you don't actually budget for it and know what's down there. Because ultimately what happens is you've got old lines that are cast iron, that are rotted, that are breaking. Just might be, staining the water if it's on, anyway. So like there's lots of challenges there. And so like that's, if that's not an issue, CapEx is typically very minimal, but those are the big items that we have that are not necessarily reoccurring. And we might go in and buy a community and completely put in all new water and sewer lines. That doesn't normally happen. But normally what we'll do is we'll go in and budget. If we know that there needs to be improvements over a 5-year span, we'll just do it in phases. Roads are one that typically, if we're going to do it, we go in all at once and literally just repave an entire community. So that could be, sometimes multiple 7 figures, depending on the size of the community. Sure. Outside of that, just like one-stall playgrounds, we might put in a community clubhouse, but more amenities associated with those capital expenditures than that of reoccurring.
Yeah. And I imagine that's a way for you to live out, creating some impact in the communities as well as through those common, or even just something as simple as having a decent road to travel to and from home makes a big difference.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I mean, the amenities as well. I mean, we normally go, before we spend any money, we don't make assumptions on what the residents want because the demographics they're very different from community to community of how many kids are there, the average age of the folks living there. And so we don't make assumptions. We'll go in and we'll have a basic budget of roads. Everyone wants roads that work well, right? Everyone wants, we've got a cluster of mailboxes that they're not all rusty and falling over and that the doors open up and there's a covered shelter. So if it's raining, they can go get their mail, right? Like there's basic stuff like that. But outside of that, we do surveys and we get the residents involved to find out what do they really want. Like if they could pick top, 3 things, what would they love to see and what would they use in the community? We don't want to assume that they're going to use a clubhouse because we actually own communities that have big clubhouses that were there and they never get used ever. And then we have other communities that don't have them. And that's all they want is a clubhouse so that they can rent it out for birthday parties and events and things like that. So just getting them involved in the decision. It's their community. While we might own the basis of it, it's their neighborhood. It has been before we came into the picture. And so we want them involved in the decision-making.
Yeah. I really love that paradigm, Kevin, just recognizing that you're almost a steward of it and that, that they are the community. And I think that says a lot about how you think of impact. And I know I learned a ton about your business, and these interviews always go super quick, but we got to jump into the lightning round now. So
sounds good.
Just want to get to know you a little bit kind of personally. What would you say is your biggest win?
And I'll take this from, I could take it from many, personal, I'll give it to a personal, my family, my wife and boys, huge. I mean, like that's it. That's why I do what I do. And that's my purpose. Professionally as a team, I mean, literally my partner and I wouldn't be here, wouldn't be able to build without the team that we have. And I think we've got the right people on the bus and all doing it with a similar alignment of interest, doing it for the right causes. So.
Yeah, great. I love that. How about your favorite movie?
That's a tough one. I'm going to geek out on this one and be a dork. And this is mostly because it's like, back in the 80s, I grew up riding like BMX and doing all that the things that kids don't do nowadays. They don't ride bikes outside or anything. Right. They got electric scooters, but someone will get this out there. But, and I don't know how old you guys are, but the movie Rad, I don't know why it came to mind, but I don't watch a ton of movies, but that one, I probably have watched it more than any other movie in history. And I haven't seen it for many, many years, but it's definitely one that gets me all pumped up when I watch it. And it's cheesy and it's got
Nice.
horrible acting in it, but it's really good.
It's so good.
I love it.
I haven't seen it, but I'll have to check it
Yeah.
out. What's a favorite food of yours?
I love Thai food.
Thai food.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's like the Sunday meal we don't want to cook, and just if we're going to do takeout, we do Thai food.
So good. I love it. How about a current growth edge? What's a way you're trying to grow, like personally or professionally?
Yeah, I just, I read a lot. I try to attend a lot of different conferences. Another I think a big aspect of the growth of our company, I've got a number of friends. They're now friends, but basically other guys that have similar sized businesses that do what I do, but in different asset classes. And we get together at least 3 times a year and we strategize. I mean, we built this like 7 or 8 years ago. There's no charge. It's just literally us getting together somewhere fun for 3 days and literally having structure in place and sharing ideas of what's working, what's not working. And that's probably the biggest impact of my business, because all of them are just hard driving individuals. They've grown great organizations for the right purpose, but just different asset classes. So we can share great ideas and strategies and not necessarily be direct competitors of one another.
Yeah, that's huge. I feel like that kind of mastermind, iron sharpens iron type concept is so necessary. What's some really good content, A+ content you're taking in these days, whether it's books, podcasts, whatever it is? What are you taking in?
That's a great question, man. I feel like I am lacking a little bit while I read quite a bit. I wish I had something that just stuck out right that I'm like, man, this is just a phenomenal book I just read. I'll say the one that we just had a team meeting last week. We flew our entire team in all the way down to community managers for 2 days of just camaraderie, getting together and having fun and spending some time face to face. As we talked about earlier, we're all remote now. So sometimes folks feel like they're on an island, but one of the books that has had the biggest impact, and it's probably the book I've given out the most to just general folks, and we just gave it out to our entire organization. And it's a short book, and so I've already received feedback from it. A lot of folks read it on the plane ride home. Is The Go-Giver. Phenomenal short book and just incredibly impactful. And anyway, just that's the one that comes to mind because it's fresh. And literally, I just gave out like 50 copies last week.
Yeah, way to lead by example. I feel like that's a great way to show the importance of not having a taking mentality, but really a giving mentality. Cool. Hey, if folks want to connect with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to find out what we're doing over at Sunrise, you can go to investwithsunrise.com. Outside of that, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And my last name's unique enough that you just type in Kevin Bupp, and you'll track me down fairly easy on any one of those channels.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Kevin. I loved hearing about kind of your heart for the communities in the mobile home space and really even broader than that, how you think of investing and creating impact in this world. So thanks for being on the show. Thanks so much to our guests for listening in, and we'll catch you all next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Real Returns Podcast. We hope that you learned something new about how you can invest to make a lasting impact on those around you. Please be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you listen to your podcasts, leave us a review, and share about us on social media. We hope you will join us for our next episode, where we will be continuing the conversation around impactful real estate investing.